In 2014, NVIDIA was a graphics card company. Gaming GPUs. That was their business. They were worth about $15 billion, which was solid for a chip maker. Today, they're worth $3 trillion. They control 80% of the AI chip market. And nobody saw this coming. At least not the way people think it happened. Most people assume NVIDIA won because they built better chips than AMD or Intel. That's the wrong answer. It's too simple, and it misses the actual game that was being played. The real story starts with a decision Jensen Huang made about 10 years ago. One decision. It was so subtle that the competition didn't even realize they were being locked out until it was already too late. By then, there was no way to catch up. Here's the thing. NVIDIA didn't dominate because they made faster processors. They dominate because they built a moat so deep that competitors can't escape it, even with unlimited funding and better technology. That moat isn't made of superior engineering. It's made of something much harder to replicate. This is what separates a trillion-dollar company from a good company. Good companies make good products. Trillion-dollar companies make it impossible for anyone else to compete, regardless of product quality. We're going to walk through the 3 strategic moves that made this possible, and more importantly, why those moves are now impossible for anyone else to replicate. The CUDA Gamble, building the invisible moat. Let's start where most people get it wrong. They focus on the chips. They talk about performance metrics and architecture decisions. None of that is the real story. In 2006, NVIDIA faced a choice. They could do what everyone else in the industry was doing, build chips that worked with existing software frameworks. Follow the standard. Play by the rules everyone else was already playing. Instead, NVIDIA did something that looked insane at the time. They built CUDA, a proprietary programming platform that only worked on their hardware. Not just a software library, a completely closed ecosystem. Developers who wanted to use it had to buy NVIDIA chips. Period. People in the industry thought this was terrible strategy. You're locking out customers. You're going against the trend toward open standards. Every other chip maker was standardizing on OpenCL or other open frameworks. NVIDIA went the opposite direction. But here's what most people missed. Software engineers don't actually care about the chip itself. They care about the tools. If your tools only work on one chip, developers will buy that chip. Because switching means relearning everything, rewriting code, losing months of productivity. By 2024, CUDA has been around for 18 years. That's 18 years of accumulated libraries, code samples, research papers, and developer expertise. Researchers trained on CUDA don't switch to AMD or Intel because the switching cost is astronomical. It's not a technical problem anymore. It's an economic problem. AMD has built chips that are genuinely faster than NVIDIA's on certain workloads. They still can't gain market share. Why? Because the software ecosystem doesn't exist. The tools don't exist. This is exactly what happened with Windows. Macs were often technically superior, but Windows had the software ecosystem locked down. Once you've trained an entire generation of developers on one platform, switching costs become insurmountable. The timing was crucial. CUDA launched when deep learning was still purely academic. By the time AI became commercially valuable, CUDA was already embedded in every major research institution, every university, every laboratory. The lock-in was complete before the market even existed. The data center pivot, betting against your own business. But CUDA alone doesn't explain how a graphics card company becomes worth $3 trillion in a single decade. The second strategic move is what actually built the empire. In 2012, NVIDIA made 80% of its revenue from gaming GPUs. Gaming was predictable, profitable, and growing steadily. Console makers were buying chips. The PC gaming market was expanding rapidly every year. This was a cash machine. Reliable. Safe. The obvious play if you wanted to maximize quarterly profits and keep shareholders happy. Then Jensen Huang made a decision that sounds completely irrational if you're running the company for short-term earnings and Wall Street expectations. He bet the company on data centers, not gaming, not consumer hardware. He deliberately shifted engineering resources away from their most profitable business toward a market that barely existed yet. This is a strategic bet in its purest form. Sacrifice current profit for future dominance. Most executives can't do this. Boards won't let them. Shareholders won't tolerate it. Jensen did it anyway. Here's why data centers were the actual prize. Gaming GPUs are consumer products. You sell a chip to a gamer, they use it for a few years, then they buy a new one. Data center chips are infrastructure. Infrastructure is sticky, expensive to replace. Once you're in, companies keep buying from you because switching costs are enormous. One gaming GPU customer buys a chip every few years. One data center customer buys thousands of chips and replaces them constantly as hardware ages and workloads grow. The economics are completely different. The margins too. Gaming chips compete on price. Data center chips compete on performance per watt and software compatibility. The execution was ruthless. NVIDIA didn't just build data center processors. They built the entire ecosystem around them. They optimized everything for AI workloads before AI even existed as a commercial market. This wasn't luck. It was calculated positioning. When deep learning exploded in 2015 and 2016, NVIDIA's infrastructure was already there, already optimized, already compatible with CUDA. Competitors were still building general-purpose processors. NVIDIA was already specialized for the exact workload that would dominate the decade ahead. Then something beautiful happened. As AI labs bought NVIDIA chips, they trained their models on CUDA. As those models went into production, they required NVIDIA infrastructure. As more companies adopted those models, they needed NVIDIA chips. This created a self-reinforcing loop. Adoption strengthened the moat. The moat drove more adoption. More adoption meant more CUDA code written by developers. More CUDA code meant higher switching costs for everyone. Higher switching costs guaranteed more adoption. NVIDIA didn't win because they built the fastest chips or had better engineers. They won because they locked developers into CUDA, then positioned themselves as the infrastructure layer for AI before anyone else even saw it coming. The moat isn't the technology, it's the switching cost. Every new AI model trained on CUDA makes it harder for competitors to gain ground. That's why a company that makes chips is now worth more than most countries combined. The blueprint is simple. Build the platform, not the product.